Hello everyone. Today we're going to set up a Flare VM. So Flare VMs are used for malware analysis, and when properly configured can hold a malware sample that you can detonate in a controlled environment. So it contains a whole lot of tools, so you should have fun if you know your way around the computer. Now each step in this is going to be pretty important. Make sure to pay close attention. If you skip any of the setup, most likely
you're gonna have a bad time.
So first thing that we want to do is get our hypervisor up and running. If you don't know what a hypervisor is and you're new to virtualization, check out my introduction to virtualization video. That'll give you a basic Windows VM and give a pretty good rundown of how a snapshot works. So we'll take it from the top since we want everything as clean as possible. So the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to open up our browser. We're going to download Windows 10 Enterprise. So Windows 10 Enterprise is going to be in the Evaluation Center. You see this download the ISO Enterprise. Here you can put in your regular info if you want to be a part of this, but I'm just going to put in some placeholders and then download now. We're going to do this 64-bit edition download. So save our file. It should be in this ISOs folder, and we can rename this guy to 10, just end, like Lord of the Rings. So if we open up a new browser tab and we search for Oracle VirtualBox. And here we have this Get Started Download button in the middle of the page. So click on that. And since we have a Windows host, we're going to download the Windows host file. Save the file. We're going to save it in our Downloads folder. And then we're going to run it. We're going to hit Next. I accept the terms in the license agreement. Next, next, yes, yes. We're gonna bypass the shortcut on the desktop and we'll leave all the other ones. Install. We can go ahead and start VirtualBox up. So we're going to create a new virtual machine. And let's name this virtual machine Flare VM. And we're going to save it in our virtual machines folder that we created on a separate drive. Here in VMs, select folder. The ISO image is going to be what we just downloaded, Windows 10 Ent. We can skip the unattended installation. Hardware for base memory, we're going to crank it up to 8 gigabytes. And processors, we're going to crank up to 8 as well. How I reason this is I'd like to have about 3 virtual machines running simultaneously, and so I divide the green space by 3. So if we crank our base memory all the way up, we have about 24. So 1/3 of 24 is 8. And it's the same thing with the processors, 24, and we go down to 8. And that's kind of the logic behind it. If you're just running 1 virtual machine, you can crank it all the way up. If you're running 2, you would want to go about half, but this is kind of the bandwidth that you have to use your virtual machines. Hard disk, we're going to dial this up a bit. We're going to go to 150, and we're not going to pre-allocate the full size. And that's pretty much it for our basic settings. We can right click and go to settings. So everything should be okay for basic. For advanced, we can click on the shared clipboard and go host to guest so that we can only bring things in to the VM. Drag and drop is kind of the same way. Under system, deselect floppy, move optical to the top. Under network, this is kind of important. We're going to not attach the internet quite yet. And that's for a couple of different reasons, but we'll get back to that in a little while. Make sure that all of your other adapters are off. Under serial ports, we're going to make sure all of these guys are off. And that should be pretty good. Okay, so once you have your virtual machine set up kind of like this, go ahead and boot it up. Install Windows, defaults are fine. Install now. Check that and give everything you own to Windows. Next, custom install, new, apply, and OK. Next, and you're gonna let it install. We can go ahead and do everything that we need to. So United States, US for the keyboard. We don't want to add another keyboard. I don't have internet. We're going to continue with limited setup and analyst. Super memorable password. Wonderful. If you're seeing this screen, you have successfully logged in as a local user to a Windows 10 virtual machine. We're going to Devices, Insert Guest Edition CD Image. Hit the folder icon, go to this PC. So if you click into it, you can open up the AMD64 version, and we can say next, next, install, and just wait a second. There we are. We're going to need to reboot the virtual machine. So we're going to leave that selected and hit finish. And give it a moment to detect the guest editions. Once it does so, you'll be able to expand the window and it should conform to whatever size you want. This is where you would put in your desktop background and your lock screen because Windows didn't do their license check yet, so you can do your personalization settings. We'll rename the PC to I will leave a light. We can restart now. And I think we have a pretty generic base image for this. So before we do anything else, we're going to shut down and we're going to take a snapshot. Go over to our VM and hit snapshots. We can take a snapshot and we're going to name this base. Okay, and now if anything happens moving forward, we can roll back to this base snapshot and it'll be right where we left it here. So if we open up our Firefox and we go to Flare VM on Google, it's this Mandiant Flare VM GitHub page. And if you scroll down, here we have Flare VM. And we see it's a collection of software installation scripts for Windows systems. It allows you to easily set up and maintain a reverse engineering environment on a VM. So it's really good for malware analysis and reverse engineering. Disable Windows updates. So to disable Windows updates, we're going to open up this link right here, and we're going to follow this group policy version down here. So search for gpedit.msc. And then we're going to go to this location here. We can type in run and gpedit.msc computer configuration administrative templates. Computer configuration administrative templates, and then Windows components and Windows updates. There we are. And then I believe it was configure automatic updates. Yeah. Open that up. Then we're going to disable. Apply. Okay. Wonderful. Disable tamper protection and any anti-malware solution. With these guys, none of this has worked for me, but I did find a pretty good workaround for this. So in order to disable Windows Defender, we're going to open up our virtual machine in safe mode. So if we type in system configuration and we go to boot, there's this safe boot option here. So apply and OK. And we're going to need to restart. And here we can see we're in safe mode. Open up our File Explorer and this PC. C. Here we're going to need to put in program data and then Microsoft and go down to Windows Defender. Okay, right click, properties, and we're going to go to security, and we're going to go to advanced, and under owner, we're going to change it. Now we're going to go to advanced, and we're going to find now. Okay, so here we have administrator. That is the username that we're using, and we're going to say okay and okay. All right, now that we have the ability to change these, since we changed the owner to ourselves, is we are going to select these and we're going to remove them all. And we're going to replace all child objects permission entries with inheritable permission entries from the object. So that's effectively going to just disable this. So we're going to say apply and yes to all of these warnings that it gives you, and okay, and okay, and okay. Okay, so once we have Windows Defender turned off, we can now go back into system configuration, go to boot, then deselect safe boot and apply, okay, and then restart. And Windows Defender is disabled. What I like to do in stages is take snapshots in between so we have different points to refer back to. So we know that we are configured to install it now. So what we're going to do is we're going to shut down the virtual machine and we're going to take another snapshot. Free flare. Now let's boot it back up. Okay, so at this point we should be able to run Flare VM. So let's go ahead and let's put this side by side with the GitHub instructions, and we can expand this just a little bit more so that we have a little bit more real estate, and I'll make myself scarce. From here, we're going to need to do a few things before we can run that. So we're going to need to download the installation script. So we're going to open that in a new window. We're going to Control A, copy that, and we're going to paste it into our Notepad++. We're going to save as install.ps1 on our desktop. And so if we minimize everything, it is right there. So let's open up our virtual machine and let's copy that over. So before we can run this, we need to do a couple of things. We're going to open up PowerShell as an administrator. Yes, at the UAC prompt. So we can see here that we are in the system32 directory. So what we want is we want to be on the desktop. So we can change the directory with cd space c : /, and we're going to go into users, analyst, and desktop. And then if we hit ls, we see that we have install.ps1 on the desktop. Cool. Unblock the installation script. So what we want is unblock-file.install.ps1, and that should unblock the file. Cool. Now we need to enable script execution. To type in set execution policy unrestricted -force. Okay. So if we want to view our execution policy, we can say get execution policy -list. And now we see local machine unrestricted. We can execute the installer script. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use this right here. And that should give us minimal interaction with the setup as it goes along. We're going to type in /install.ps1-password. Put in your password. -no wait -no GUI. And that should kick things off pretty nicely. So hit enter. And it's going to do an internet check first. So if it can't connect to google.com, it's going to throw an error, and then it's going to just exit out of the script. So what we need to do is go to our virtual machine settings in details, and we're going to go down to network, and under not attached, if we go up to NAT and OK, that should give us an internet connection in here in just a second. There it is. So if we try that one more time, now we can see that it's able to connect to Google. It's also able to connect to GitHub. So it's going to go ahead and start to run. And if we leave this alone, it should finish in a couple of hours. After it does its initial checks, which you can see outlined here, it's going to ask if you've taken a snapshot to ensure that you can revert back to a pre-installation state. So we have multiple snapshots that we can use. So if anything goes wrong, we can totally just roll the clock back and continue. And if you see this screen here, then you know that you have Flare VM installed. Also, we have this background, which is pretty nice. Now, the cool thing about this background, if you turn off your internet, this will actually change. So if we put this on the right and bring our VirtualBox manager out like this, and we go down to not attached and OK, then it takes away the internet connection, and it also changes the background to one without internet enabled. Cool. So once we have the internet off, we just want to do one more thing before we detonate any malware. So let's go ahead and shut down our virtual machine, and we're going to take another snapshot. So take, and we're going to call this one Flare. All right, now whenever we revert back to this Flare snapshot, it's not only going to go back to that state that we were in inside the VM, but it's also going to bring this network adapter back to not attached. So that's always a good thing to have. Now, before we start the VM back up, we need to configure our network so that we can kind of make it a little different than our own home personal network. The last thing that we want to do is give an access point for anything that we're detonating in there. We're going to build out an internal network for these virtual machines. If we have the tools and we go over to network, here we have host-only network adapters. So we see this 192.168.56.1/24. Okay, so here we want to change this if it is anything like your host machine's IP address. So let me go ahead and show you what I mean. So if we open up PowerShell on our host computer, and we type in IP config, my Ethernet adapter is running 192.168.56.1. We also have our wireless LAN adapter, and that is running 192.168.1.56. So these are a little different, but we want to change it enough to where it's not going to be able to automate any scanning or anything like that. So what do we do in this instance? We're going to change the subnet of the host-only adapter so that it can accommodate a new network without jeopardizing the one that we're already on. So we're going to hit create to create new VirtualBox host-only adapter, and yes at the UAC prompt, and give it a second to create it. And now we see that we have this 192.168.67.1/24. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down to IPv4 address, and we're going to change this to 10.0.0. We can leave 255.255.255.0 as the network mask. We're going to go over to DHCP server, enable server. The server address is going to be 10.0.0.2. We can leave the server mask as 255.255.255.0. Lower address bound is going to be 10.0.0.3. And upper address bound is going to be 10.0.0.254, which is the last IP address on this subnet here. Once we have that going, we can apply and yes at the UAC prompt, and the DHCP server is enabled. Cool. So let's go grab our malware sample. So boot up your virtual machine. So first thing we want to do is we want to go and grab a browser that's easier to work with. So we're going to open up Edge so we can download Firefox. Google get and the zoo. And it's going to be this YTISF, the zoo, a repository of live malwares for your own joy. So essentially what this is just a big folder that's filled with all kinds of different nasty pieces of software that will do all kinds of different stuff to your virtual machine. So we can see the zoo is a project created to make the paucity of malware analysis open and available to the public. It's a way for you to practice your malware analysis and reverse engineering skills. So we're actually going to go into the malware folder and then in binaries. And we're going to Control F so we can find WannaCry. And here we have ransomware WannaCry. So we click on that, and then we have all of these files in here. So this MD5 and SHA-256 are going to be the hashes. So like if we open this up and we copy out that value and we go somewhere like VirtualBox, and we throw that hash in the search bar, we see that we get a lot of hits for it. 67 out of 71 is pretty high. Diskpart.exe, that's hilarious. But if we scroll down, we can see the vendor analysis is Trojan, ransomware, unsafe, WannaCry. We just, everybody kind of knows that this file is bad news. So if we go back to the ransomware WannaCry folder, we see that we also have a pass file. If we open that up, we see that the password is infected. Ransomware WannaCry.zip. So this is going to be our sample here. We're going to download this with this download raw file button right here. And we're going to get this file contains a virus or malware pop-up. So if you click on this banner, then you can allow the download. And now we have the zip file. So as it is, the malware is kind of useless because it's zipped, encrypted, and password protected. So we can cut that and we can put it in a new folder on the desktop. WannaCry. And open that up. Paste it in there. I like to take another snapshot. And that way, when we run the file, we can revert back to this point and we can do further analysis on it without really hindering ourselves. And we're going to do a few things before we take that snapshot. So the very first thing that we want to do is we want to turn the internet off, or rather switch it over to that Ethernet adapter that we created earlier. So go over to attach to host only adapter. And then we're going to select a VirtualBox host only Ethernet adapter number 2 and OK. So we can look back at the virtual machine. We see that the background has changed. The internet is now off. And we're also going to go up to devices and then down to shared clipboard and disable that, and drag and drop and disable that. Okay, now go over to the hamburger menu snapshots. And here we can take a snapshot and we'll call it fire in the hole, since we're about to arm the malware sample on our virtual machine. So now that we have our snapshot, we can revert back to that if anything were to happen. So we should be good to detonate. Okay, so the very first thing that we're going to do if we want to detonate the malware is we're going to open up this file and we're going to unzip the folder. So we're going to right click and we're going to go to 7-zip and ransomware WannaCry, and our password was infected. And here we have our file. We can see that it's the hash.exe. Be very careful. This is now a live piece of malware, so we want to be just extra cautious when we're handling things like this. But the very first thing that we do when we want to analyze something like this, before we run it through any decompilers or we look at anything that it's doing in the background, we want to see just kind of how it runs. So we're just going to go ahead and run it. Here we go. Okay, so right off the bat, we see this wannadecryptor.exe. We also see please read me, and we see a bunch of these other files pop up. This WNRY extension, we can easily look that up. So if we go over to file info and we type in .WNRY, we see that it's a WannaCry virus encrypted file, and we see that it's associated with WannaCry ransomware. Pretty easy to tell that these files are no good. If we open up one of these files, it's going to say, what's wrong with my files? Oops, your important files are encrypted. It means you won't be able to access them anymore until they're decrypted. What do I do? First, you need to pay services for the decryption. Please send $300. I'm pretty sure that the last time I ran this, it was $600. So we'll see. Worth a Bitcoin to the Bitcoin address listed here, and we can find an application named wannadecryptor.exe, and it will decrypt the ransomware itself. We can see that it popped a countdown timer for when the payment will be raised. We can also see the files will be lost on this day, which means that they're essentially just not going to give you the decryption key after this point in time. You can see that if we hit check payment, it's trying to connect to a server or on the host only network. So that's always a good thing. But we can hit cancel, we can hit decrypt, we can kind of just move our way around and look at the things that this file is doing. This line is pretty funny. We will decrypt your file, surely, because nobody will trust us if we cheat users. Honor amongst thieves. Let's go ahead and let's exit out of this program. And what do we do from here? It's infected, and we want to take that file, and we want to open up that file in one of these other tools. But we can't really do that with it, running amok everywhere. So let's go ahead and let's exit out of the virtual machine. And there's this little checkbox here that says restore current snapshot to fire in the hole. So if we check that and OK, it'll take us to the point right before we detonated that piece of malware. When we open up WannaCry, we can see that it is still in that zip file. So it literally is like we went back in time to the point where we were about to detonate this. So when you get to this part, you would essentially just do what we did before. We would unzip the file, we would put in our password, and we would just go from there. You can open it in a lot of different tools. It definitely came with a lot of stuff. So if you open this tools folder on the desktop, you see that we have quite a bit of different types. We have debuggers, we have Delphi, we have disassemblers, all kinds of other stuff that'll help out with analyzing pieces of software or reverse engineering it. So if we wanted to get rid of everything to do with this file, we would simply just exit out of the VM, power off the machine, go back to our snapshots, and then we would delete fire in the hole. And we would restore back to Flare. And deselect this create a snapshot of the current machine state. And now, if we boot the machine back up, it'll be like we never downloaded the malware sample to begin with. But that was pretty much everything that I had for Flare VM. I really hope that you guys learned something. I had a lot of fun doing this. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and until next time. See ya.